movement. Within seconds, the front doors are thrown open and life rafts thrown out. In the midst of the chaos, Joanne is handed to a Coast Guardsman and then reunited with her mother. Another moment caught on camera.
When I saw myself being lifted up out of the life raft by one of the Coast Guards, I could picture them just smiling and just being really loving. And then seeing myself on the video put my arm around one of the Coast Guards, when I saw my mother looking at me and I reached out for her, to see my mother on the video and to see that stressed look, I gotta say that just really made me think about what happened and what she had to go through.
Captain Ogg is the last person off the plane, which sinks about 20 minutes after hitting the water. The only casualties are the 3,300 canaries in the cargo hold. Miraculously, all 31 people on board survive.
I feel like it's such a miracle. All of us that survived now have lives, and we're able to create lives.
It's a rarity for commercial jets to end up in the water. When they do, passengers rely on a combination of luck, skill, and good judgment in the cockpit.
Experience is something you can never buy, and you don't need it often, but when you do, there's no substitute for it.
What you're looking at is the most dramatic, most violent ditching ever caught on camera. It's a Boeing 767 slamming down in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa. Unlike the other ditchings we've seen, this one was not caused by mechanical failure, nor by the weather, or even a bird strike. As perilous as those situations were, at least those pilots were able to do their jobs without having to wrestle with terrorists in the cockpit.
That captain was under a different kind of stress than we've seen in these others.
Absolutely. He not only had the issues of having to put the airplane in the water, he had people on board that were trying to kill the airplane and everybody on board with it, including himself.
November 23, 1996. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961 from Addis Ababa to Nairobi, Kenya, should be a routine 2-hour flight. It turns out to be anything but. The pilot, Captain Leul Abate, sat with documentary filmmaker Salim Amin, whose father Mo was killed in the crash. In the cockpit of a Boeing 767 simulator, Captain Abate relives the hellish flight.
So they came into the cockpit. How many of them?
There were 3 of them. They took the fire extinguisher and they started beating the co-pilot. Go out, go out. I said, guys, hold on, what's going on? I said, shut up. The flight is high.
Claiming to have a bomb, the hijackers demand to be flown to Australia.
Okay, guys, I told them, this flight is destined to Nairobi. We don't carry enough fuel to Australia. Let's land in Nairobi, we refuel, and then we can go to Australia. Otherwise, I told them it's impossible.
The hijackers refuse to allow Captain Abate to refuel at cities along his route. They want him to fly out over the water towards Australia. The pilot knows they can't make it, so he hugs the coast.
Then he said, why are you flying along the coast? Australia is somewhere to this direction. And I told him, okay. I turned the heading. And now this message came, fuel, low fuel.
Almost out of fuel, the plane approaches the Comoros Islands off Africa's east coast. As the plane descends, the hijackers fight the pilot for control of the plane.
I said, guys, this is finished now. We are all dead people now. Let me do it my way. And he said, I don't know how they did it. He disengaged the autopilot.
Disengaged it?
He did.
From this control?
Yeah, from that control.
Right.
Then I disconnected the autopilot. Then I had to start flying it myself.
In the cabin, passengers start to panic.
When the pilot first made the announcement that the plane was out of fuel in one engine and running out in the other, the plane just broke into pandemonium. And then We heard passengers in the back who panicked, and they all inflated their life jackets. They all put them on and inflated them.
So you could hear this happen?
You hear a little pop, 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 pop.
In the cockpit, Captain Abati tries as hard as he can to put the plane he'd nicknamed Zulu down safely onto the water.
Okay, you have to hold it, hold it, hold it. Okay, Zulu, now you're going to make it. Now you'll make it.
The 767 is traveling at about 200 miles an hour, far too fast to ditch safely. But there's an even more serious problem. As this video shows, the wings are not level, a dangerous angle for ditching. The left wing drags along the water with disastrous results.
They catch the left wing first. You'll actually see it come off. He's fighting to control the airplane. The engine hits, it's shedding parts, and then it actually pretty well rolls over as it sheds both wings. And if he had been able to hit a little bit more wings level, the chances of survival would have gone up. The biggest problem with this ditching is the fact that they catch that left wing.
One can only imagine the pandemonium inside the airplane. Survivors report feeling a series of increasingly violent impacts.
The plane first hit the water, and it was quite gentle. Then there was a hard bump. And the third one was like 60 mile an hour, worst thing you've ever felt kind of thing. And then it was getting progressively worse, and the plane was like tumbling or something. I said, that's it, I'm dead.
Of 175 passengers and crew, 123 die at the crash site, including all 3 hijackers. Some victims are standing at the time of impact and are violently thrown to their deaths. Many die because they disregard safety instructions and inflate their life jackets while still inside the plane. As the cabin fills with water, they're pushed up against the ceiling and drown. But as tragic an outcome as it is, it could have been even worse.
The fact that some people survived, is it good, heroic piloting, or were there mistakes made here?
Were there mistakes? You can Monday morning quarterback this and say, well, they could have done this better, they could have done that better. But under the conditions that they faced, I'd say this crew did pretty well.
Commercial jets are not designed to land on the water. It's dangerous and potentially deadly. So why would a pilot take such a risk? As we've seen, sometimes they simply have little choice. In one case, a giant 767 is felled by terrorists, hijackers who don't care if they or anyone else on board lives or dies. The pilot does his best to put the plane down safely, but the impact kills 123 people out of 175 on board. Over the Pacific Ocean, another flight has a mechanical problem and ends up in a virtual no man's land, too far to go back or forward. When the plane meets the water, there are violent consequences. The aircraft ends up in pieces. Miraculously, everyone on board survives. Over the Caribbean Sea, a DC-9 that's had a staggering chain reaction of bad weather and bad luck runs out of fuel. The violent impact kills 23 of 63 on board. And in the most famous case, a jet has the misfortune of running into a flock of Canada geese. All on board survive. If your plane runs into a situation where it may have to ditch, you want the right person in the cockpit, making sound decisions.
I just know that it took every bit of my education, training, and experience, along with that of my entire crew. I think we have nearly 140 years of experience at this airline, the 5 of us, to be able to come up with a number that was 155 on January 15th.
The Flight 1549 incident and Sully Sullenberger has gotten a lot of us thinking about experience. When we see very young people in the cockpit, what should we know about their training and their level of experience?
I think the point is so much not how many hours someone has, but what's happened during those hours, what kind of training has gone on.
At America's oldest and largest aeronautical university, Embry-Riddle in Daytona Beach, Florida, tomorrow's pilots are being prepared for their own dramatic moments. Students here are constantly drilled in just about every type of emergency that could, but rarely does, come up.
So that when something does happen, it's sort of like muscle memory. They go back to a mental process they've already done before. If the engine does quit on a small airplane, they've already done it 15 times in the simulator and in the airplane as well.
Yeah, coming up on 3,000.
Both the engines are rolling back.
I feel like we're losing thrust. We're losing thrust.
Television journalist Lester Holt is not a licensed pilot, but he has had plenty of flight instruction. He's about to ditch a plane in the Hudson River in one of the university's 36 flight simulators. It's clear that even in a training exercise, it's nerve-wracking.
Okay, stick shaker, I'm going to stall. I need to drop the nose.
Yep, drop the nose. You're going to head for about 230 knots.
Okay, I don't think we're going to make an airport. I see the Hudson River off.
You're about 400 feet right now. Start leveling off. Good. Now back pressure. Good.
We're down.
There, that's it. You're in the water.
We're down. Okay. Whew, that'll get your heart rate going.
Yeah.
6 weeks after the real Hudson River ditching, the crew of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 testified before Congress. It's clearly important to have the right person in the cockpit making the right decisions. Airline professionals like Captain Chesley Sullenberger worry that the industry is going in the wrong direction.
If we do not sufficiently value the airline piloting profession, and future pilots are less experienced and less skilled, it logically follows that we will see negative consequences to the flying public and to our country.
With all respect to the captain, I'm kind of surrounded by a lot of young people, and they're 18 to 22 who all aspire to be at Captain Sullenberg's seat one day. I look at them at age 22. They're further along than I was, and I was a military aviator. When they get to be our age, they're going to be as good as we are, and probably a little bit better.
U.S. Airways First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, who sits in what he refers to as the right seat as a co-pilot, is troubled by the trend he says he sees of less experienced pilots being rushed into the cockpit before they may be ready.
When we were brought up in the industry, you started out, so you learned how to fly smaller airplanes, you worked your way up to bigger ones, but the smaller commuter jets have the exact same complexity and speeds that we fly at, but people are essentially learning how to fly in 6 months, and all of a sudden they're in the right seat of one of those airplanes.
The standards that the pilots meet and the training is still set by the FAA, and everybody, of course, has to meet that. But is there a lessening of experience across the industry? Yeah, there is. And you don't find as many Sullenbergers today as you did 10 years ago.
Why Planes Crash continues next Monday at 9. Details coming up. Now turn over to Wild for the brand new series of Hunters of the Lost World.
And then seeing myself on the video, put my arm around one of the Coast Guards. When I saw my mother looking at me, and I reached out for her, to see my mother on the video and to see that stressed look, I gotta say that just really made me think about what happened and what she had to go through.
Captain Ogg is the last person off the plane, which sinks about 20 minutes. Movement. Within seconds, the front doors are thrown open and life rafts thrown out. In the midst of the chaos, Joanne is handed to a Coast Guardsman and then reunited with her mother. Another moment caught on camera.
When I saw myself being lifted up out of the life raft by one of the Coast Guards, I could picture them just smiling and just being really loving.
It's after hitting the water. The only casualties are the 3,300 canaries in the cargo hold. Miraculously, all 31 people on board survive.
I feel like it's such a miracle. All of us that survived now have lives, and we're able to create lives.
It's a rarica. Unlike the other ditchings we've seen, this one was not caused by mechanical failure, nor by the weather, or even a bird strike. As perilous as those situations were, at least those pilots were able to do their jobs without having to wrestle with terrorists in the cockpit.
That captain was under a different kind of stress than we've seen in these others.
Absolutely. He not only had the issues of having to put the airplane in the water.
For commercial jets to end up in the water. When they do, passengers rely on a combination of luck, skill, and good judgment in the cockpit.
Experience is something you can never buy, and you don't need it often, but when you do, there's no substitute for it.
What you're looking at is the most dramatic, most violent ditching ever caught on camera. It's a Boeing 767 slamming down in the Indian Ocean off the east coast of Africa.